Now welcome to a deep dive into the first episode of Andor Season 2 titled 1 Year Later. I already did a more general review or overview of the first 3 episodes of the first arc, and if you missed that video and you're curious, without any spoilers, I thought they were excellent. I was impressed with just how cinematic they felt and how beautiful it all looked. The performances too were once again, much like in Season 1, very much a highlight, and for me at least, I absolutely love and am into the story of these characters. I get that some people out there, they found these episodes maybe slow or even boring, or all of Season 1 slow and boring, and if that's you, if that's your prerogative, that's fine, but I'm okay with them taking their time and telling such an interesting and rather nuanced story, which is what I'm here to talk about. So let's jump right into the first episode, and I think how I'll do this is to sort of break it up into 4 sections, because there are 4 sort of storylines in the first episode, ones that then carry on through the whole first arc, and we will begin with Cassian, and he starts out disguised as or impersonating an Imperial test pilot. He's going to try and steal a prototype TIE fighter of some kind from Sinar Fleet Systems, which is a name I'm sure a lot of Star Wars fans out there are very familiar with. They make ships and weapons, most notably, they make TIE fighters. And so it begins with him talking to a young Imperial technician who, we don't know her whole story or anything like that, but she has decided to help him to help the rebellion get their hands on this ship for some reason. We don't know exactly why the rebellion is interested, beyond why wouldn't they be interested in a prototype ship that seems as cool as this one. But she has decided to do her part in the fight against the Empire, risking her life to do so. She wants Cassian to give her like a 12-minute head start to get on the run, to get away before the Empire starts looking for her because of what she's doing here. And she is, unsurprisingly, very nervous, and Cassian is trying to keep her calm. He's trying to encourage her and keep her spirits high and to let her know how important this all is, that she is doing her part and she is going to feel good about herself, that she fought the Empire. And what I really like about this is, it doesn't just seem like Cassian saying what he knows she needs to or wants to hear in order to stop her from maybe getting cold feet, if you will, and backing out. He does seem to genuinely care about her, which is a far cry from the guy we see at the start of Season 1. A guy who seems to really only be out for himself. More or less, he does have people he cares about. Don't get me wrong, he's looking for his sister after all. But more or less, Cassian is all about himself and what he can do for himself, not for any cause beyond that. We even see at the start of Season 1 how he owes everyone money. He's trying to dodge everybody who he owes money to, and he clearly lies and knows how to sort of sweet-talk people to get what he wants. He is just that kind of guy. But now this is someone who has a cause that he very much believes in, who knows very well how bad the Empire is after Narkina 5 and maybe some other experiences. He knows the threat it poses to real people, those who might just be in the wrong place at the wrong time, like he was once upon a time. And again, he feels like a totally different character, a totally different person, which was very much earned throughout the course of Season 1, and now we see who he has become because of Season 1. We see him risking his life not for a payday like on Aldhani, but to further the cause of the rebellion somehow by stealing this Imperial TIE fighter. He is no longer someone who just uses people, but one who, is probably going to do whatever he needs to do at certain times, but also someone who actually cares about other people. Again, I feel like he actually cares about this technician, and he doesn't want her to die tonight, which she is so afraid will happen. And overall, I really like the stark contrast between the opening of the 2 seasons, because he's about to steal this ship from the Empire, not in order to make some credits, but simply for the rebellion. And he does succeed, even though as soon as he gets into the ship, we can tell something has gone wrong, or he wasn't properly prepared. We don't know why that is at the moment. We will learn later what went wrong. But he doesn't seem to have any clue how to fly this ship, which results in him just barely escaping. And the whole chase scene and escaping the hangar, the whole sequence feels like some classic Star Wars, a great way to kick off the whole season with some action. Some, again, more traditional feeling Star Wars, you could argue. It looks good, it's fun. Again, it is a great way to start the season off. Next up then for Cassian, again, we're following his whole storyline first, then going back and covering the others. But we see him land this prototype TIE fighter on a jungle planet. and minor spoiler alert if you haven't seen the second episode quite yet. But it will turn out to be Yavin 4, the eventual location of the secret rebel base we will see in A New Hope, and he's here simply to pass on the ship to the next guy before returning home. He left him here a few days ago, but now he's not here, it seems. Because since then another group of rebels have arrived, and this other pilot Cassian was going to meet named Porco, who I don't think is a relation to Porkins, but who knows? But this other pilot likely had no idea who they were, who this other group of rebels was, and vice versa. So it seems like they killed him because he was hostile to them first, according to them anyway, according to this new group of rebels that showed up. And after Cassian is taken captive because they have no idea who he is either, he just shows up in a TIE fighter, and so they don't trust him even though he showed up at their secret location. Anyway, Cassian eventually learns that they escaped from some sort of failed mission or fight against the Empire, where they lost a few ships and like 40 fighters, I believe it was, or 40 soldiers, and that their leader was named Maya. She was killed, and Cassian knows Maya because they're basically supplying this cell. They have been supplying Maya this whole time. They are all on the same side. And even though, as I said in my overall review, this wasn't exactly my favorite part of the episode or of the first arc, it does do a really great job of showing just the absolute disorganized state of the rebellion at this point in time. And it very fittingly uses the backdrop of Yavin 4, which we know is where they finally will get their stuff together and form a cohesive unit that eventually does stop the Empire. It also shows how fragile the early rebellion actually is and how much it lacks good, strong leadership and resources. I mean, it only takes 2 days without food and water, which does suck, don't get me wrong, but it only takes that long before they are turning on each other, before they are choosing sides and pointing fingers and placing blame and arguing, and that quickly gets out of hand to the point where they open fire on each other, and a couple of them are killed, and this turns into a sort of standoff situation with one side, the side without the cool TIE fighter, taking Cassian captive, which is where his story kind of ends in this first episode with him being taken prisoner. But again, this was a really good start with the stealing of the TIE fighter. The stuff on Yavin certainly gets the point across, shall we say. It certainly lets us know just how bad the early rebellion really was, how disorganized and dysfunctional they all were, that they're all on the same side and fighting each other instead of fighting the massive empire, which they are a huge underdog against. We then move on to the planet Mina, which is a giant farming planet. Essentially, they produce a massive amount of grain, and we find that Brasso, Bix, and Willem, who escaped Ferrix at the end of Season 1, they are hiding here illegally. They don't have visas, and of course the Empire has decided to show up out of the blue to do an inspection, and they are of course worried about being discovered and being arrested and being taken away by the Empire, or something worse if they figure out they were part of the incident on Ferrix. And it all begins with a nightmare that Bix has, one that reminds us of the torture she went through in Season 1 at the hands of the Empire and at Dr. Gorst in particular, who made her listen to the screams of dying alien children, which sort of drives you mad. It left her in pretty rough shape at the end of Season 1, and we see that she is doing somewhat better, but still, of course, having nightmares. And all of this will be relevant to another traumatic experience she will have later on in this story arc, which we'll get to in due time. Though, speaking of aliens, I will quickly take a moment here to point out that, once again, much like with Season 1, the show does feel a little lacking in that department. I love how big the series makes the galaxy feel. I love all of the amazing world building and all of these different cultures we get to see and learn about, but we don't ever get any aliens anywhere. And I really thought the Rebel Cell, the one I was just talking about on Yavin, that would have been a good place to insert a couple of them, just because aliens are a pretty big part of the rebellion. But unless I missed it, they seem to all be humans, and for me, it's the most disappointing aspect of the show, I think. I just want a few more aliens here and there, or maybe, an actual main character who is an alien. But anyway, letting that gripe go for now, we see that the old Ferrix crew is, or has, kind of settled down nicely on this new planet, and has been more or less welcomed in by the locals. It seems Brasso has even found himself a nice woman to settle down with, and Willem has also potentially found one, but the girl's mother doesn't like him. Again, the Empire ultimately shows up, but in this episode, we don't get much more information than that. We don't spend a ton of time here in general, which is not a complaint one way or the other. It just is what it is. It's a starting out point for these characters in this new season. And for me, it's all fine and good. I'm fine with them establishing where these characters are and what has been going on and how they have been doing. And again, I understand why some people might find this kind of stuff slow. I understand why some people might say this isn't Star Wars, or they're saying we could have condensed these 3 episodes down into just one and we wouldn't really lose anything. I get that traditionally Star Wars does tend to move at a bit more of a blistering pace, especially the films. But I'd argue one of the issues I have with the other Disney Plus shows is that they try to imitate the films a bit too much at times, that they do go at a blistering pace for no apparent reason, because this is a series, you don't have to race through it. You can take your time, and I think sometimes that tends to destroy character development. I think Ahsoka was a perfect example of going too fast for no reason. Filoni wanted to keep the pace moving so badly that he just ignored what would have and should have been some key character moments that only make everything better and more interesting. The way he skipped over Sabine and Ezra, I've talked about it before, but them never having a discussion about how exactly she found him in another galaxy and what she gave up to do that was almost criminal. But anyway, my point is, if you're doing a series, if you have the time to actually build characters and you don't have to rush from one action scene to the next, you should take that opportunity. Action has far more meaning when you know and care about the characters that are in danger. And no, that doesn't mean that you can't try to, still keep a decent pace going. But oftentimes in shows like this, in more character-driven shows like this, and Andor is absolutely a character-driven show, but patience tends to pay off nicely. And I think it absolutely does in the 3rd episode of this arc with one of these Ferrix characters and what ultimately happens to them. But let's not get into that here and now. Moving on, we also have the Dedra storyline, I guess we could call it, which starts out with her and some others at a secret meeting being hosted by Director Krennic, one where he's warning them not to say anything to anybody, that even their superiors, or even other high-ups in the Empire, the most senior members of the Empire, don't know anything about what they are doing here or about to talk about, and so they really shouldn't say anything unless they want to deal with the Emperor himself. They're all then shown a video that, well, it might remind some people of the type of video they have watched back in their school days, something you might get the old video projector out for. And it's a video about Gorman that lets you know everything you'd ever want to know about them, about the planet and the people and what they do and what they are known for. And it is done in a more clever way than, say, just Krennic or one of the others at this meeting just doing a pure exposition dump. Either way, it turns out what Gorman is famous for is twill, that they have spiders that make this special silk that makes some of the finest garments in the galaxy. But no surprise, that's not exactly what the Empire is interested in. Instead, they're interested in calcite, a type of material that is needed for Palpatine's energy initiative, which is meant to bring stable and unlimited power, Palpatine and his unlimited power, but it's meant to bring that to the galaxy. It's the most important part of his agenda, Krennic tries to tell them, but we know the truth, that it's actually about the Death Star. And I love that in the book Catalyst, which is a prequel book to Rogue One, which this show is also, of course, a prequel to Rogue One, but in that book, Krennic talks about this initiative there as well to bring free and stable energy to the galaxy, how is so important to Palpatine, and he uses that in order to convince Galen Erso to unknowingly start working on the Death Star project. So I'm pretty sure Krennic is just using the same cover story here, which is cool. I'm glad we are keeping that consistency. Catalyst is a really, really good book that I recommend to anybody who is either enjoying Andor or Rogue One. But anyway, the problem with all this is why they have been assembled like this is because in order to get to the calcite, they have to drill down into the planet core, and that might just make the planet become unstable, and thus they need to come up with a plan to keep the Gorman in line should they, mess up and pretty much destroy their planet. They don't want things to go wrong. They don't want any resistance from them. We then hear from a duo representing the Ministry of Enlightenment, which, I don't know, sounds like something out of Harry Potter for some reason, but this is not Harry Potter. This is the first time, I believe, the first time we've ever heard of this ministry in Star Wars. Don't quote me on that, but I don't remember hearing about them. But they basically seem like a media manipulation tool. They basically talk about how they control people through propaganda, how they release a story, control what is or isn't known or said about the given story or about the situation it is covering, and then they decide when to end the story. And they do it all in an effort to make people think a certain way. Again, it is basically just propaganda, or the Department of Propaganda. Later on then, Krennic talks directly to Dedra, asking what her plan is, what she's come up with, because he can tell she already has one and that she's kind of this rising star in the Empire that he's heard about. She tells him that propaganda can only get you so far, and what they need are Gorman rebels you can count on to do the wrong thing. She has clearly learned from her experience on Ferrix when the Empire pushed and how the people of Ferrix pushed back, which from their point of view justified their reaction to start gunning down the people of Ferrix. But she's basically telling him that you need some Gormans to, shall we say, overreact after the Empire gives a gentle push, thus justifying the Empire to respond accordingly. And I think given some of the things we have heard from Tony Gilroy about the no Russian thing, which is from a Call of Duty game, but I certainly think this is about the Empire about to plant some rebels in the Gorman population that will push back as much as they need them to, should something go wrong. And all of this is just fascinating and rather disturbing, of course. Everything from how propaganda can, without you ever beginning to even realize it, how it can make you think a certain way because it's always framed a certain way. Hell, a real-world example I think we could use is the prequel trilogy, actually. How the media, back in the day especially, they always talked about how everybody dislikes those movies, to the point where if you ask someone today, do Star Wars fans like the prequels, there's a really good chance they'll tell you no, simply because they've always heard that prequel fans don't exist. And I think the same goes with the sequel trilogy, but in reverse. The media is always framing it as if there is only this very small angry minority who didn't like those films, and yet, if you're in the fandom, it seems like more than a small angry minority didn't like those films. And in the grand scheme of things, those are rather harmless examples of how the media can shape opinion of how propaganda actually works. I could certainly go into some other examples that are much more troubling. And there are a lot of things, for better or worse, I suppose, depending on what you want Andor to be. But there are a lot of things in these episodes that certainly hit close to home or mirror things going on in the real world. I'm not going too deep down that rabbit hole right now. I'm just going to watch the series, tell you what I think about it in the context of Star Wars, and if people want to have a discussion beyond that, they're certainly free to. But here and now, let's just talk Andor and Star Wars. And now we move on to the wedding storyline, which I've seen quite a few people complaining about, that why in the hell are we wasting so much time on a wedding in something like Star Wars of all things? Which is kind of funny because I think I found that to be the most interesting of the storylines, partly because of how cool the world building is, how we get to see Chandrila and how their customs and culture works, and partly because of all the subtle intrigue and how things are sort of coming to a head at this wedding, and how some of the things will ultimately be resolved in the end. But in this episode, honestly, there isn't a whole lot going on quite yet. Everything is kind of being set up. We know Luthen has shown up with Clea. We know he's waiting for word on Cassian's mission and that he's gotten some type of gift for the soon-to-be newlyweds, or that Skulden has bought it from him and he's just here to present it, basically. I love when the three of them are together, when Luthen, Mon, and Skulden are talking, and Skulden is worried that Luthen will spill the secret, and Mon says that, yeah, he's a terrible liar, or he's terrible at keeping secrets, to which Luthen says he's been practicing, which is just a great moment because we know just how good of a liar, or how good Luthen is at keeping secrets, and the lengths that he will sometimes go to in order to keep secrets. We know he does indeed have plenty of practice at that sort of thing, and that Mon also knows he does. We also know that Tay is here and he wants to talk to Mon about something, but we don't yet learn what that something is in this episode. We do learn he has recently split with his wife, so we can maybe start to assume it has something to do with potential interest in Mon or something along those lines. I don't know. That's not exactly where it goes, but that's something we might assume. There's also some trouble in paradise for the young newlyweds, or soon-to-be newlyweds, as Lita seems to maybe be having some second thoughts about marrying Skulden's son, who she sees as a child because he wouldn't hold her hand, to which Mon apologizes to her for, though Lita doesn't understand the depths of that apology. She doesn't understand that, in a manner of speaking, Lita was sold to him in order to help protect the rebellion. This is Mon feeling guilty, and as this arc goes on, we see her feeling more and more guilty about what she has done, what she has forced upon her daughter, that she has forced her into this wedding from her point of view, even though the daughter was open to it. But she has forced her into these old traditions and customs in order to help protect herself and the fledgling rebellion. And so overall, though not the most exciting episode ever, other than the beginning, which was really enjoyable and was action-packed and exciting, it was a classic Star Wars chase. But overall, it's a solid opening episode and a solid way to kick off Season 2, one that sets the table for much, much more to come, both at the end of this arc and for later on in the series or season, I am sure. Again, I do get why some people don't enjoy it so much, and if this were the only episode we got this week, I may agree with you that it did feel a bit light or like a little more needed to happen, which is why I do think they were smart to drop all 3 episodes at once, and we'll continue to do that. We will continue to get an arc each and every week, a 3-episode arc, because combined, these 3 episodes feel much, much better, much more complete, and like you're basically watching a movie. But either way, a great start to what I hope will be a fantastic second season of Andor. Well, that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below and tell me what you thought of this first episode of Season 2. Did you love it? Did you find it a bit slow and boring? Whatever the case may be, leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time. And I will be doing the other 2 episodes the next 2 days. But until next time, thanks for watching.